Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video. I'm your host, Daniel Walker, and this is Activist News. Now, just while we're waiting for some people to come into the chat, um, it's been a while since I've had you on, Chris. Now, just you are very infamous on the YouTube scene, to say the least. But just for the credit of those who aren't entirely familiar with who you are or what you're about, would you be able to give us a brief introduction about who you are and uh, yeah, what you're all about, I guess.
Well, thanks for having me back on. Um, I've been I've been working and forwarding the dissemination of our constitutionally enumerated God-given rights and calling for rational government and the abolition of this current criminal one world government run by a combination of the Jewish organized crime network and the Catholic Church and the Bank for International Settlements and the UN and the IMF, etc. Um, well before there was something called a YouTube scene, but yeah, I've had many terminated YouTube channels that have had millions of views and I guess I'm a man, and other folks on have me on international television. They call me an economist. They call me a civil rights activist, and some call me the commander of the Virginia militia, which is the basis of the law in the United States. The militia, and of course Australia, um, and England, the UK, Canada. Um, but that's what I do. I advocate for rational government, which is just mind control, control of the mind. I'm pro government, not anti government, but I'm pro constitutional government, and I comprehend what government means. So I control my own mind. So I'm definitely pro government, and everyone out there should be pro government, which means control your own mind. So I mean, we've made thousands of videos. We've made hundreds and hundreds of international television appearances, debating the top newsmakers and news creators of the world, and I mean, we just say very simply, God creates man, and man creates government. Man can never be subjected to his own creation, and we stand on our own 2 feet. We confront government criminals usually while armed um, on their crimes and their treason, and we call for the lawful abolition of the government and the punishment to the fullest extent of the law for the criminals that run all governments of the world, um, and it's lawful and it's the only hope for humanity.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to put it. You've also gone into more detail on this in a book that you've written called the Militia Handbook, and I've put that link in the YouTube comments for anybody that wants to check that out. But one thing that stuck out to me before we get into the main crux of this conversation, which I guess is the whole stuff that's going on in Charlottesville, they're calling it Unite the Right 2.0, Jason Kessler and a few other things. I mean, this whole alt-right thing. I mean, this is something I've spoken about myself as well. So, uh, most of my audience, I think, I'd like to hope that they're pretty on the ball with this sort of stuff. But one thing you did said is, and I've heard you talk about this in regards to natural law, is God creates man, man creates government. And I think that's one of the, for me as a Christian, I think that's one of the more important points. And especially when you look at it in terms of a tyrannical government. And I know a lot of this happens with the whole mind control television. They put our children through school at a very young age. You've got after school centers that, for when they finish school and they've got to wait for their parents to pick them up. You've got holiday centers, you've got preschool, kindergarten. there's so many structures of indoctrination in place before you actually get into the real world, make a life for yourself, get a job, and do all of that sort of stuff. But all throughout that time, you constantly get this notion pushed into your mind that the government is our boss, and the police are above us, that we work for them. They give us a direct order, therefore we should follow them. And I don't think it's been a natural progression into this. I do think it's been the result of I mean, if you want to call it mind control, for lack of better words, I don't know what the best term to use would be, but there's just so many people caught in this matrix or this Jew tricks that don't realize that the government work for us. And it's the same here, even in Australia. Anywhere that's under a commonwealth or a constitution has this law in place. And we can also talk about the
That's right.
Magna Carta as well. People do have the right to stand up. And I mean, especially in America, where you have the First and Second Amendment, and that's why I do really enjoy your work, because you don't just talk the talk online. You're actually out there behind the trenches, so to speak, actually doing this stuff offline and encouraging other people to do the same thing.
Yeah, I think that's a key point, and I think one of the reasons why I can do that is it's an advantage and a disadvantage. I'm older than many who are doing this same work. I mean, younger than some, but I remember doing this before uh, even thinking about filming myself doing this, and others, and being concerned about getting news coverage, and not even being able to control my own content. So this is very a very key point about what you say, is the fact that this is something everybody needs to do. Just talking about it is nothing. You have to exercise your rights, not just talk about them. And I wish to say something that you hit upon about the Commonwealth nations, and the fact that the law is based, and this is natural law and constitutional law. Natural law is based on he who wields the weapons of war has the power. That's just the natural order of things. So, of course, the government is going to be a tyrannical overlord for the people, because the people have been disarmed of the weapons. The government has the ability to neutralize through military force the people, and this is warned about. That we are, I should say, we are warned about this in our Constitution. It says a standing army is dangerous to liberty. That's what it says in the Constitution. In our Constitution, it says Congress has the ability to, this is Article 1, Section 8, has the ability to finance a military, but it can't finance a military and army for more than 2 years. Why is that? Because a standing army is dangerous to liberty. When you have a standing army, and you mentioned the police, they are a standing occupying army. An occupying army for who? You and I know this, but we can make it simpler for the less educated. We know that Jewish interests mostly, and foreign interests being Vatican interests, Israel, the Vatican, Jewish interest in Russia, Jewish banking interest in all the other countries led by the Bank for International Settlements. They are the foreign occupying force. And how do they do it? Well, they buy out the guns. They buy out the so-called security forces, the standing army, the police, and then they engage in war through these entities. I remember doing an interview on Press TV back in 2016 and talking about not only Jade Helm 15, which is an offensive military operation of Northern Command, which is the United States Army Command over the United States of America, and something called unconventional warfare exercises 16. Now that they go unconventional warfare exercise 16, unconventional warfare exercise 17, unconventional warfare exercise 18. And that ties in with what you saw this weekend and last year in Charlottesville, and what was also going on in DC this weekend. These are asymmetrical warfare operations. You can talk about chemtrailing, you can talk about the wildfires caused by directed energy weapons. These are unconventional warfare exercises against the American people, or the thousands of people every year who are gunned down in the street by the police. This is all part of a plan. And the good thing is also the bad thing. The Constitution doesn't apply in this country or any other country for that matter, but they are operating under something called continuity of operations or continuity of government. I go in great details about this in the book, the Militia Handbook, and this is a Department of Homeland Security and FEMA presidential directive that was put in place after the staged false flag attacks of 9/11 carried out by, well, mostly the Israeli Mossad, but dual Israeli citizens also inside the Pentagon and throughout the United States government, and just traitors of every nationality and ethnic group within the United States government. And that was planned for many reasons. It's never just this or that. It's always this and that. But one of the main reasons is to put in place this continuity of operations, COOP, directive, executive directive, presidential directive, which shuts down any bit of legitimacy that the government may have had before September 11th, 2001, and puts in a hardened, in-your-face police state, which is unconstitutional, takes away everybody's rights, and that's how they do it. That's without getting into all the minutia, which we can do. You can take it either way, but we can do it that simply. It's out in the open. The Constitution doesn't apply anymore. We are all fictionalized corporations, and they are operating, they being the governing forces in these FEMA regions in the United States, are operating under the auspices of COOP or COG, continuity of government or continuity of operations, which is part of UN Agenda 21. And I just keep saying UN Agenda 21. I know about 2030 and I know about 2050. That's all subgroups and subsections of 21. So if folks are listening to this, which I doubt they are, and don't know what UN Agenda 21 is, and don't know that that is a, among other things, a European genocide agenda, you need to do some research, and you can still listen to this program and get a lot of information, but I presume all the listeners really know that that's the main plan. But what to do about it, that's key.
That's another issue within itself. But just going back to the UN stuff, I did have a friend from Greece on the show about maybe 2 weeks ago, and he actually brought some documents to my attention that I wasn't aware of, something called the Replacement, I think it's called the Replacement Migration Act or something like that. And this is a plan to basically do exactly what they're doing today. I mean, you can look at the Greater Israeli Project and all of the bombing over Yemen, what's happening in Syria, and all of the destabilization in Africa, and how that in turn plays into another plan called the Kalergi Plan, and how it's basically displacing Europeans from their homeland, and even Americans, for that matter, and here in Australia too. But yeah, I mean, this is something that we've spoken about quite a bit, especially in regards to the UN. It'd be good to see more people talk about this. I know you talk about the Bank of International Settlements as well, which is something that a lot of people don't talk about. But just not to digress too much, but I'm getting a lot of people saying in the chat, that for whatever reason they didn't get a notification that this stream was on. So yeah, I can't help that. I don't know what Google has done. They've done some updates recently. It was a struggle to even start this stream.
Oh,
Yeah, so if you guys do uh, want to get this out there, just give us a like and also share this on your favorite social media platform. Let them know we're going live now. And I guess towards the end, we'll be taking some questions if we've got a bit of time and if time permits. But now I really want to get into the main reason of why I thought it'd be a good idea to have a chat about this, because I know in regards to Jason Kessler, I know you know a little bit more about him than me. You seem to have more knowledge on this sort of stuff, so I thought it would be an interesting conversation. I think we agree on most points regarding what this Unite the Right rally is all about, but I'm going to quickly share screens. So hopefully everybody in the audience can see this. And yes, I know it's CNN. I know. Yep, I know. White nationalists dwarfed by crowds of counter-protesters in Washington.
yeah.
Approximately 24 white nationalists rallied in the nation's capital on Sunday, 1 year after clashes in Charlottesville, Virginia, left one person dead and elevated racial tensions in America. But they were vastly outnumbered by thongs of counter-protesters. The showing from Unite the Right 2 participants fell far short of the hundreds that organizer Jason Kessler was expecting based on event permit applications. I've got the permit up here. We'll have a look at that later. Kessler, who
Right.
organized last year's Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, blamed the low turnout on logistical issues and confusion regarding the group's transportation. A claim echoed by at least two men who spoke to reporters. Quote, "People are scared to come out after what happened last year," unquote, one man added. A small stage and speaker system was set up in the park where attendees stood silently and listened to a slate of impromptu speakers. Now, I mean, I'm not going to read the rest of this because it goes right into, people, conservatives and white people being racist and how they're all the KKK and all of that sort of typical nonsense. I wasn't actually there, of course, I'm in Australia. I'm very surprised to hear, first of all, that there was only 24 white nationalists that rallied because I know of at least 8 people that went. And I do think that the whole Unite the Right thing is a part of the broader agenda to breed separatism. I mean, this is what Yuri Bezmenov has been talking about. This is the ideology of Dugin. I mean, he's written a book called, can't remember what it's called, Strategic Geopolitics, where he openly talks about breeding all types of separatism and using their proxy forces, their Russian intelligence units inside America to destabilize America, to undermine America, and to bring about, I mean, this is what Bezmenov and Dugin have spoken about before. Basically, put the United States in such a state of dissatisfaction, distrust, and self-destroying that they actually look to Russia as its savior. And I think it makes a lot more sense when you consider people like Dugan. We'll get on that a little bit more later on. But I just want to say, if you were one of the people that did attend Unite the Right, maybe you can correct me if you feel that it was more than 24, because that does sound like a very small number.
Well,
Yeah, go ahead.
just real quick, I didn't want to mess up your flow of thought real quick, but I was there and I was looking to find these guys. I had other contacts up there, was talking to multiple individuals in other media outlets. There was such a crowd behind a barricade. They had barricaded everything off. They said there was confusion about the logistics. I call BS on that the whole time. The thing shouldn't have been in D.C. It should not have been in Washington, D.C. That's the worst place to have any sort of legitimate demonstration. Number one, I had to leave my gun at home whenever I traveled to the Rome, Maryland, which they call now the District of Columbia, Washington, D.C. And I went out looking for these guys. And as you and many of the listeners know, I've been attempting to track this guy down, Jason Kessler, who appears to be Jewish, not unlike many other so-called anti-Jewish alt-right operators. And I saw a couple guys that I recognized as, actually, I should say I saw 5 individuals not openly acting as alt-right. I would say half the individuals there were wearing masks, and I'm talking about the supporters of Jason Kessler. They were wearing masks. What I'm saying is all of this is staged by the government. So you got to stop saying that all these things they just went wrong. They went exactly like they were supposed to. And for the horrendous turnout that Jason Kessler got, and you'll notice that he can't walk anywhere in any town, including his alleged own hometown, which I don't believe he's originally from Charlottesville, but he may be, without police escorts. So this is all a hoax. I don't know what to say about those 8 individuals that you know that went to this event, but they are either just the most ignorant kind of dupes, or they're government agents, because that's the only kind of individuals that follow any of these guys. It's simple, it's basic, and it's simple. Restore the rule of law. Our rule of law is based on the English common law, based on the writings of John Locke and 2 treatises on government. It is based on the fact that if somebody attempts to steal your property, which is anything that you work with, they are the enemy. They're engaging in war against you. And what John Locke says, and what the founders of the United States knew when they created the militia clauses in all the colonies of the United States, which later became, all the American colonies, which later became the United States of America, they knew that the militia was the only way to have a free state in the United States. The only thing that's deemed necessary in the Constitution is a militia, and that does not mean a bunch of redneck white trash guys running through the woods, drinking beer and playing target practice. That couldn't even stand up to a small town SWAT team. We're talking about gaining control of all of the high-tech weapons of war, gaining control of DARPANET, gaining control of the nuclear arsenal, gaining control of all the weaponized drones and weaponized weather apparatus, etc., etc., etc. If folks are willing to sign away their right to free speech and say, oh, this is all fine as long as we have safety, anybody who says that is not worth listening to. And our elections are rigged. We have no say anyways. And we have to ask permission just to drive down the road to get to what? Anybody's places of employment. What is that? It's all in the name. Employ. Oh, ploy. Oh, you're engaged in somebody else's ploy. What does that mean? Well, they make lots of money off of you, and they give you as much money as they decide after they've taken their share. And that's the basis of this system, slavery. So we like to tie this in, being a descendant of members of the Virginia militia, and which is the last legal law enforcement arm in the United States. When did that end? It ended during the War of Northern Aggression, when the Jewish and foreign financed United States government invaded Virginia and the rest of the South, and then the Virginia militia, the North Carolina militia, and all the other Southern militias became the Confederate Army. And then what happened? We had the 13th Amendment and the 14th Amendment. And what do they say? Citizens are subject to the jurisdiction of the United States government. So we've gone from the Constitution, which begins by saying the people ordain the government, which is a ecclesiastical creation. It means the people created this government. This is ours for our benefit. And it goes from saying people ordain the government to saying persons are citizens of the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. So it goes from the people being the masters to the people being the subjects. And that's unacceptable. And if anybody accepts that, they are not worth following, not worth listening to. If they abide by anything that goes on in this completely fraudulent society, legal system, corporatocracy, system based on fake man-made creations that are, we are told, are more important than our free will and free thought and our God-given rights, don't listen to them. If somebody's telling you to vote in an election, they're dupes. If somebody's telling you, hey, we've got a better way, but hey, it doesn't have anything to do with controlling the weapons of war or controlling the money. Look, our money supply, everything that we require in this society to live our lives is based on the whims of our enemy. For example, as the value of currency has plummeted, the wealth of our enemies has at the same time skyrocketed. Why is that? Because they've taken our valuable property and first given us worthless pieces of paper, and now that everything is based on cryptocurrency, electronic digits, electronic ones and zeros, and an algorithmic computer program, they've taken all of our valuable properties, and if we're lucky enough, they rent it back to us, charging us taxes and fees to rent out what used to be our property that we owned outright. So they create money out of thin air based on our property, which is everything that we work for. And so they create money out of nothing. They charge us interest on something that's based on us. They bond us out, and then they tell us, hey, the economy's great. Yeah, inflation's up, and that wiped out all the increase in salary and increase in so-called employment. But the thing is, it's worthless. We don't own anything. I laugh when folks say they own a home. Try to stop paying the state property taxes when you get a mortgage after you paid your mortgage off and you allegedly own your home. See how long you stay in there. It'll be for a year or less, because somebody with a gun will come and take you out of so-called your home if you don't pay a yearly a tax fee on that. So basically, what does that mean? It just means, well, you say you own a home, but basically you just pay rent to the government for what you say is your home.
Exactly.
More,
even if you've inherited the house.
Absolutely. Even if you've inherited the house. But that doesn't apply for everyone. Some at the highest levels, they get away and they get everything for free. Why is that? Because we pay the price. For example, when we went up to Charlottesville and they shut down the entire downtown area of Charlottesville, put it on lockdown under martial law, tanks and military choppers flying above and driving around on the street. Who pays for this? Well, what did it cost? It cost well over $2 million. I bet it's going to cost close to $4 million just for the police action and not for the ancillary stuff. And so they charge us to what? Shut down our cities, make our lives inconvenient, search our property, take away our rights, take us off in handcuffs, and for what? Nothing good for us. We get nothing but ill effects. And those who support the government and financially benefit from it, they get nothing but value out of our slavery. And it is absolutely absurd. If folks are afraid, stay inside. Don't go out in public if you're afraid of somebody walking around with a gun. And the reason that they do all this stuff, the reason everybody was so afraid about Charlottesville is because they stage these events. Antifa is led by government agents. The so-called conservative white nationalists, they're nothing but government agents. And the people, they have hardly any representation. And I think this is very clear, and I'll say this with the utmost confidence. I don't know. I mean, they say Virginia is all about gun rights. I don't know any other true gun activists other than myself in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And this is where the largest concentration of gun activists in the world are. And I don't even like to call myself a gun activist. I just comprehend that unless the people gain control of the weapons of war and the issuance of currency, the slavery will increase, the police state will get worse, and our lives will also get much worse than they even are now.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I mean, even in Australia, you know, the whole police state. I mean, it's just getting ridiculous. I think Americans, on the most part, and of course, you know, I'm not generalizing. I know there's a big spectrum of people who are just ignorant about their own rights, but in Australia, I get the sense that it's a lot worse. And man, you know, I really hope I can get some people to really wake up to themselves here. But just going back to what you said before about Antifa, someone, where is it? I can't find the comment now, but someone tagged me to ask you if you knew that Antifa was started in Germany by a bunch of Jews.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, they got the exact same logo as they used back then.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. And
Just in regards to that, I know that, you know, I know there are people. They may be ignorant. I'm willing to concede that they may be ignorant about the bigger agenda about what's going on, specifically with the Unite the Right rally. But I know that the few people that I know that did attend went there with the best intentions, and I hope, you know, a communication like we're having here today can actually help them, because I want to get into the Jason Kessler stuff as well, and I'm going to add someone to the conversation. Where is he? You know Charles? You remember Charles, don't you, Chris, from Twitter?
oh yeah, Charles. Yeah,
Yeah,
truth something.
he's a
Yeah.
good bloke. He's definitely got
I've
some
had
opinions on this as well.
yeah,
And
I've had him on the intelligence report before. So yeah, absolutely. Um, I want to make something clear, and this is probably going to be unpopular, but um, you know, we're not really relying on well-intentioned individuals who are doing the wrong thing. Whether their intentions are good or whether they're bad and they're doing the wrong thing, either they're not smart enough to know what the right thing is, or they're intentionally doing the wrong thing. To me, it doesn't matter. Both are equally bad. And if one is around these circles and in communication with you, I mean, we talked about Jason Kessler on the last show that we did, and I don't know exactly what I said, but pretty much I can't imagine I didn't say exactly this guy's a government agent. All of, just about everyone you see on the internet is either a government snitch type information artist or somebody who is a well paid intelligence agent. And this is easy to figure out. And I'm not interested in reaching the masses because the masses are always going to be followed. The masses are always going to be ruled over, whether it's ruled over by someone like myself who is benevolent, or when I'm talking about we, I'm talking about those who agree with everything that the basis of our Western European culture is. Giving everyone rights, respecting each other, but also protecting ourselves. If somebody's not going to get on board with that and push for that, and they're going to follow individuals, you see, this is what I didn't really get about last year's Unite the Right. And everybody that we talk about, everybody that is in this kind of subgenre of internet information, what's their plan? What is their point? What was the point of this? Jason Kessler, the Jew, gets up there and says, "I'm not a white nationalist. I'm not a Nazi." Look, the National Socialists never even called themselves Nazis to begin with. So there's no such thing as a Nazi. It doesn't exist. It's something that was a pejorative, Nazi I'm speaking of, for a German political party. So
yeah, it was basically a derogatory term.
Derogatory term, right? And so of course he's not a Nazi or a white nationalist. So he's saying that. So what's his point? Nobody really cares about what this guy Jason Kessler does or says. I mean, now, number one, Jason Kessler was a member of the Occupy movement, as was I. But what did I do? I said, look, this is a government operation. If you don't know that, I'm telling you, think about it. The government has been infiltrating and creating, and now they don't even infiltrate anymore. They only create every political party and movement in the United States, but it's also in Australia, it's in the UK, it's in Europe, it's in the Middle East. Occupy came out of Otpor and Canvas, and all they do is overthrow governments, destabilize nations. That is their operation. And that is what we have. If folks don't realize that and they're not on the lookout for infiltrators, government agents, then they are worthless. I mean, exactly. A lot of guys, yeah, they go like, "Oh, hey, Chris, and blah blah blah. Hey, what are you gonna do? I disagree with you, and how are we gonna really get people to join us on our cause if you're doing this?" And I'm saying, whoa, wait a second, no. You only, some people, they won't even say their real name. So don't bring me into whatever you're doing. Our plan is very simple. It's very easy. We have never been debunked. We've never been proven wrong. And it's easy when you don't have an agenda except for looking out for what you believe is right and not violating others' rights and standing up for your own. It's that simple. And when you do that, one has to come to the conclusion that the government must be abolished, the Constitution and the rule of law must be restored. And although I'm not against any ethnic minorities, or I don't even want to say the word minorities, any other nationalities except for so-called Jews who have been causing problems in humanity since they first started tribing up together. But I will say that the reason why they are forwarding this white genocide agenda or European genocide agenda in overdrive now is that is the last and only rival that could ever knock off the usurpers. And when I say the usurpers, I'm speaking of Jews and Jewish puppets, like Donald Trump. We went
Exactly.
all over,
A good
and
Shabbos
I
goy.
believe
I think you might actually be a Jew. I've been looking into some stuff that made me think that he might actually have some Jewish blood. But
I
just
again,
before we get into that, we did have Charles that just joined us. But just before I get him to quickly say hello and introduce himself, I just want to go back and read something because we mentioned Dugan before, and a lot of people don't understand how he fits into the alt-right scene. And for me, he's the architect of the alt-right. He's a Jewish puppet, a good Shabbos guy who pushes Eurasianism and well, Duganism, for lack of better words. This whole Nat Bowl nonsense that you see sweeping across the Western world. And, you know, if people want to know exactly what Dugan thinks about the West and what his plans are for the West, he has laid it out in his book called Foundations of Geopolitics. That's the one I couldn't remember. And here's an excerpt. Russia should use its special services within the borders of the United States to fuel instability and separatism. For instance, provoke Afro-American racists. Russia should introduce geopolitical disorder into internal American activity, encouraging all kinds of separatism and ethnic, social, and racial conflicts, actively supporting all dissident movements, extremist, racist, and sectarian groups, thus destabilizing internal political processes in the United States. It would also make sense to simultaneously support isolationist tendencies in American politics. Now, I just want people to think about what I said before, Yuri Bezmenov, and some of the warnings that he's given. I want people to think about the obvious Hegelian dialectic, whether you have Sheldon Adelson and the Likud neocons on the right, and people like George Soros on the left. I mean, these people are not enemies. They are not enemies. They work for the same group of people. They're all connected to the IBS, the City of London. It's the tribe. That's what we're talking about. And when you have people like Jason Kessler, who in my opinion is a Jew, we'll get onto that a little bit later on. And he's actively saying, oh, you know, let's stick up for white rights and all of this sort of stuff, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But when he's breeding separatism in terms of American geopolitics, or Australian for that matter too, because we've got this big alt-right scene thing happening here now, the UK as well. I mean, pretty much anything that happens in America culturally or in Hollywood or in the mainstream media, all of that gets pushed onto the rest of the Western world. You know, and this is why I do focus on what happens in America, because the CIA, Hollywood, the Tavistock Institute, the complete social engineering campaigns that have been going on for many years, Soviet Bloc 2.0 tactics that are occurring all the time. This indoctrination isn't limited to America. It's meant for the whole world. That's why we all watch American movies. We all have a McDonald's on every corner block. I mean, it's the culture follows, and the exact same thing is happening here. You know, we currently have Lauren Southern in my country, and nobody really knew who she was for a very long time. You know, unless they were into 4chan and you know some edgelord type shit, they weren't really aware of who this Jewess was. But all of a sudden, for whatever reason, the media starts attacking Lauren Southern, inadvertently promoting her. If you think about the Streisand effect and how that works, like, no, don't look there, don't look there. That's you're going to want to fucking look there. And that's exactly what they're doing with Lauren Southern. And all of a sudden, the nation's up in arms about this racist Lauren Southern. Oh my God, Lauren Southern, who is this person? Oh, and next thing you know, she's announcing tour dates in Australia. and all of his shows were a success. And this is how the indoctrination works. It was the same with Milo Yiannopoulos last year, or was it early this year? I can't remember. Might have been earlier this year. You know, the mainstream Australian did not care to know who Milo was. All of a sudden, the media is attacking him for a month, you know, getting him to debate feminists and all of this sort of stuff. And compared to a feminist, it almost makes Milo look normal. But all of this is done inadvertently. They are being promoted in the same way that Trump gets propped up by the left-wing media through, you know, insults, the Streisand effect, reverse psychology. You know, the more the left complain about Trump, the more the right, you know, start rallying behind Trump. But he's a Shabbos goy. And it's the exact same thing with Jason Kessler, which we'll talk about in a minute. But I had a bit of a rant there. Charles, I know pretty much everyone already knows you on this show. You've been on, I think, like 5 times now. But do you want to quickly introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, my name is, can you guys hear me?
Loud and clear.
Alrighty, my name is Charles. I will probably be releasing my last name pretty soon here. I focus mostly on anything concerning Jewish supremacy, which is basically everything. It's reality. You can't escape it. So you were forced to focus on it, and that goes for the Vatican II, which is, you know, Jesuits, the COG, Robert Maxwell, and the inseparable left and right dichotomy, the false dichotomy of Judaism that doesn't it's a false dichotomy. The left and right are the same thing. They're being promoted as different, and they're not. Communism and Zionism are the same thing. They come from the same source, so they must be the same thing. Also, I also focus on something called Sabbatean Frankism, which is where the Messianic Judaism stemmed from, which is redemption through sin, promoting destruction, and in every form, culturally, weakening integrity, all sorts. And this is where it stems from. So I focus on all this, and you guys were the first two who started me on this journey. When I heard about Robert Maxwell, it provoked a thought process in my brain that said, why isn't other people discussing this convergence point that explains everything? Clinton, Trump, COG, and it's all connected. And you guys were the first ones to provoke that thought process, and you're the only people as of now. And see, I was the first one to get Brennan to even mention Robert Maxwell, to get him to even mention it one time. And that's disturbing, because for months I've been trying to get Jeremy, any of these people, to even mention Robert Maxwell and his importance, and they won't do it. No one will do it. See, because it all comes back to the fact that it's the number one thing that exposes it all is Robert Maxwell, and he's connected to everything, and for some reason that's not important. See, so it's insane. So that's what I mostly focus on, and I've been trying to challenge people to at least mention it, which they won't. You know, and see, there's all these different things you could talk about, but to me, of course, there's these strategical points that we could focus on to expose it all. And Robert Maxwell and, of course, Jared Kushner are those two. And, of course, no one talks about this also. Jared Kushner is connected to George Soros, and Mnuchin is also connected to George Soros. So that makes Soros directly connected to Messianic Judaism. And that means that redemption through sin is what we are seeing, is Sabbatean Frankism, is weakening the integrity of the world while strengthening your own people in order to bring about the world Marxism, which is controlling every market from Israel, from London. That's what it's all about. But see, you can mention Messianic Judaism, and you can mention the Third Temple all you want, but if you can't talk about the source of it, then what's the point of talking about it? It's like mentioning the symptom. See, everybody talks about, oh, I'm talking about the source. I'm talking about the source. Oh, I'm talking about the source. But the reality is every single person on the internet is talking about the symptom, and it's all we're seeing every day. That, okay, you can talk about the Third Temple, but where did it come from? Sabbatai Zevi, which is where 1666. It all comes from Sabbatean Frankism, which is these Jews are bastardized. They come from a bastardized orgy. That's where it comes from. Is that you have to weaken the integrity of everything. Polygamy. It's basically, that's what this is, and that's why you won't see it. You won't see. It's very easy to mention Sabbatai Zevi, but you won't hear the words, right? Robert Maxwell. It's too. I mean, it's crazy that we have to say this so much, and that we have to say that Masonry comes from a Sabbatean Frankism. You won't hear any of this. You won't hear any of it. And right, it all goes back to the depopulating the European peoples. That's where it all comes back to, because that's where it all comes back to, is because the Civil War, all of it was about depopulating European peoples, because of course they're the ones who pose the first threat. And see, I agree with Chris that yes, the Europeans are I would say, are the last block to be destroyed. But I don't necessarily think they're the only people that can that may pose a threat. We don't necessarily know who may pose a threat, but I can tell you for a fact that Europeans were the first people on this planet to oppose these people, and that's why they were targeted, because they were the first. They were the initial. They were initial opposition.
I would say Romans and Greeks under early Catholic order were probably the biggest group of people that did the most to undermine and prevent Jewish power. But sorry to stop you, but you just mentioned something really interesting that just reminded me of something. You mentioned Britain, and of course, when we talk about the Britain and the power of the British and the Rothschilds, well, I can only speak for myself, but we're mostly talking about the city of London. Okay, and if we're not to be confused with the actual city in England called London, we're talking about something called the City of London, which is where all the Jewish fat cats go. More money goes through there in a minute than what goes through in a day in Wall Street. And there's a reason for that. And I just want to read something very interesting. It's by Jonathan Williams here, and I'll just read what it says. Jonathan Williams recorded in his Legions of Satan, 1781, that General Cornwallis revealed to General Washington during the signing of the article of capitulation signed by Cornwallis at Yorktown that, quote, a holy war will now begin on America, and when it is ended, America will be supposedly the citadel of freedom, but her millions will unknowingly be loyal subjects to the crown. Unquote. Cornwallis went on to explain what would seem to be a self-contradiction. Quote, your churches will be used to teach the Jews religion, and in less than 200 years, the whole nation will be working for the divine world government. That government that they believe to be divine will be the British Empire. All religions will be permeated with Judaism without even being noticed by the masses, and they will all be under the invisible, all-seeing eye of the grand architect of Freemasonry. Unquote. Now, another good way to link the City of London, Freemasonry, and Judaism together is B'nai B'rith, which is, like you mentioned before, talking about, controlling both sides. One of the things that B'nai B'rith do is they believe in these visions of what would you call it? It goes back to the Tower of Babel. These people believe in a one world government, a one world religion, and this is exactly what they're trying to do with the whole miscegenation agenda and all of that sort of stuff. They want everyone else to be goyim, and they want themselves to be Jews.
Oh yeah,
and
but one thing we have to remember, and this is what drives me insane, is we have people like No Race who will pretend that liberalism is not a Masonic, Sabbatai Zevi construct, that communism and Zionism, which is ethno-Zionism, are not the same thing because they come from the same source. You can't say that. Miscegenation comes from liberalism. Liberalism comes from Masonry. Masonry comes from Sabbatai Zevi and Jacob Frank. It's not hard to connect these dots. So when people focus on, well, I believe in this kind of American freedom, I believe in American liberalism, they're saying that I believe in Sabbatai Zevi. That's what they're saying. They're saying that I don't separate Zionism from communism.
Yeah, if I could, I want to mention a few names. I agree with Charles that it's very important to comprehend Sabbatean Frankism and especially Sabbatai V. But I kind of am have a different kind of mindset when it comes to what exactly Freemasonry is and what exactly Marxism and communism is, as far as where it initially sprung up from. I want to talk about, obviously it was, the York Rite of Freemasonry formed in the early part of the 18th century, I think 1717. And I think a lot of early Freemasonry comes from occulted, for lack of a better term, Egyptian mystery school religion, and that they kind of formed a group around some very interesting Egyptian and before that Babylonian knowledge, gnosis knowledge, and um, and so I think it's been infused as now. I mean, it's completely Judaic, almost exclusively, and it was heavily Judaic from the beginning. But so is the Old and New Testament. But I wouldn't really use the word Judaic. Maybe what's the word? Levantine, I believe, is a better word, because these were regional thoughts, and there were different nationalities in the Levant during this region. The descendants of the Egyptians are and those living in Palestine, modern day Palestine, are very different from the modern day Jews. And I also want to mention Moses Hess. I'm sure most of your listeners, Moses Hess, because he was the creator of Marxism. Sorry, I had to plug in my device. I can't really see the see how much battery I have when we're on Google Hangouts. But apologies for the superfluous.
No, you're all good. You're all good, mate.
But Moses Hess was the kind of tutor, if you will, of Engels and Marx, and that communism. He was also, I would say, the first modern day radical Zionist. I'm speaking of Moses Hess, and this was infused 100% into the writings and belief system of Marx and Engels. So I do want to say that when it comes to these things, I like to get very specific. I know a lot of Freemasons, and I simply tell them, yeah, this is all, there's nothing very special about them. I say, hey, I'm the worshipful Grand Master of all Freemasons. And anybody else who has the knowledge and has the standing can say that, because initiation is a falsehood. Everything is a initiatory process, and all these Freemasons have done is, they have some, strange rituals that they're, very theatrical, stagecraft, but they don't really mean anything. Where the rubber meets the road is in money, in control of the money, in control of the minds, which comes from money. Control the money, control the minds. And we know exactly where these touchstones are. And the quote from was that Cornwallis? The quote from?
That was, hang on, I'll just go back up to it, because it was actually in a book by
Jonathan Williams.
Jonathan Williams in his Legions of Satan, and he was in a conversation with General Cornwallis.
Yeah.
Writing the article of capitulation.
And Washington is a very celebrated Freemason, but he's also very celebrated in warning America about, as were most of the so-called founding fathers of the United States, which I have a lot of respect for. Many of them were Freemasons. So I don't think it was necessarily as as bad as it is today, and again, I have no real respect for Freemasons. I have a lot of listeners who are Freemasons, and I say that very clearly. I enjoy saying these sorts of things right in individuals' faces because they can't dispute anything that I'm saying. And the key here is that this is a long plan. It goes back, I would say the key point in all of this, as far as the modern day times, is the protocols. If you want to find out the basis of the so-called Kalergi Plan or the Greater Israel Project, it is certainly the protocols of the learned elders of Zion. If you wish to know what's going on in this world, that's all you have to do is get a copy of the protocols, read it, and you find out everything. And Jared Kushner is a key figure, but Charles Kushner is an even more key figure because he was a board member of the New York, New Jersey Transit Authority before 9/11. He was doing business and handed billions of dollars through Maurice Greenberg and AIG. They would buy and sell tens of thousands of property in New Jersey and Maryland and New York and other places. And the very key point to a lot of this is sexual blackmail, and this will tie into Robert Maxwell and Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein. And I just think that comprehending Charles Kushner is very important in this whole grand scheme. And of course, Jared's married to Ivanka, and there's all those strange pictures of Donald Trump molesting his daughter and talking about it on TV. And so forth and so on. And this gets into what Charles and Dan mentioning about just kind of the degradation of society and just like, hey, wait a second, is this guy just talking about buggering his own daughter? Oh, and this is the guy who's president of the United States? Like, you know, we all know that what these guys do behind closed doors, but now it's open for everyone. So it's kind of a moral
mockery,
race to the bottom. Mockery. Yeah, and I want to mention something real quick and throw this out back to y'all. So apologize for taking too much time, but some things were mentioned about the Rothschilds, and of course then there was the Rothschild connection to the Battle of Waterloo, financing, you know, the Napoleonic armies of France and her allies, and also the UK army or what's the guy's name? Man, I'm drawing a blank. But they funded both sides of the Battle of Waterloo, and and so I think it's not that unusual to think about how the Rothschilds weren't that interested in having, you know, Napoleon, you know, be the new Holy Roman Emperor, and they basically didn't like him because he had anti-chicanery laws. And I invite everybody to just kind of look up the definition of chicanery. And chicanery is the basis of everything that this, you know, Jewish world government does. It's based entirely on chicanery. And yeah, just I'd like to throw that back to y'all.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, how about we'll come? I think we'll come back to this because I just want to show just one more quick article. Talk about Kessler a little bit. I want to hear Charles' opinion on Kessler, and then we'll cover some questions because there's quite a few good questions here that I've written down. Some are directed to Oliver, some are directed to Chris. So I'm going to share.
I just wanted to.
No, you're right.
Yeah, sorry, Daniel. Wellington was the name I was looking for.
Oh, okay.
Duke of Wellington.
All right, so hopefully you guys can see this. This is the application that was signed by Jason Kessler. He's even got his email there if someone wants to get in touch with him. He's probably changed it now. Telephone's blanked out. Yeah, but this was, when was this signed? This was signed on the 5th of the 8th.
Yeah.
Which is unusual because usually if there's
Now-
another event on the day, like I know in Australia, where I live in Brisbane, if you're going to do a protest, you want to give as much notice as possible, because if there's someone else that's having a rally on the same day in the same area at the same time, it causes a liability issue and they won't actually grant you the permit. So it was a little bit odd that, you know, they left it till that late to actually do this application, because if Antifa had 2 brain cells to rub together, they could have very well of sabotaged them in different ways. But right down the very bottom, where is it? It talks about, you know, it says here, are you aware of any individual, group, or organization that might seek to disrupt the activity for which this application is submitted? They said yes. Members of Antifa affiliated groups will try to disrupt. And down the bottom here, just to tie in with the article that we read by CNN before, it asks about specific forms of transportation that participants will be using. And he just writes, at this time, I don't know, ingress and egress at convenience of law enforcement. So it's a little bit strange that they've left it for this long, number one. And number two, they're blaming the lack of attendance. I mean, I find the lack of attendance just astounding. You know, I know Richard Spencerstein pulled out at the last minute on Twitter and announced that he wasn't going to go and thought that it was a bad idea. I thought this was a concern because I did read about Antifa bringing guns this year. I'm very glad to hear that didn't happen, because I did have a couple of mates that were there and I was worried that there was going to be like some sort of staged event or false flag or something like that. Yeah, because the day actually lines up with a Jewish holiday as well, which is usually the time where they like killing people most.
Blood libels
on the Chabad Lubavitch website.
Yeah,
but,
about this.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Saying this the whole time. I was planning this in DC. I've been organizing in Washington DC demonstrations, and even before I started organizing demonstrations, I was participating in demonstrations in DC for even longer. You know, going back. You don't need a permit in DC. Jason Kessler could have had, 80 more people show up, 80 more persons, 80 more dupes or government agents show up, and he still would not have needed a permit. You see, the real problem was Jason Kessler said first he's going to have this in Charlottesville, which got everybody on edge. It started building it all up. And before this is another thing. Jason Kessler is not operating on his own. He's operating through his lawyer. And so before he pulled out of his alleged permit in Charlottesville for this year, which he did not need, I live in Virginia. I'm told, hey, Chris, you don't have a permit for this. I don't need a permit. And that's right. They'll warn you about things that you don't need. But it's very clear in DC, if less than 100 people, if you expect or think less than 100 people are going to show up, you don't need a permit. Even if 400 people show up, you don't need a permit. Even if 500 people show up. The statute is very clear, which I don't abide by these statutes anyways. But it says, if you think that less than 100 people or less will show up, he could have had 5 times the amount of people that allegedly showed up for him. I didn't see more than 3 or 4 of them. And he still would not have needed a permit. But what he did before pulling out of his permit that was unnecessary in Charlottesville, he signed court documents along with some Antifa group called Redneck Rebellion that they would not show up armed in Charlottesville. And I showed up in Charlottesville, and I was the only non-police or government agent that was armed. It is completely legal to walk around anywhere one wishes, and it's protected even by explicit statute. You can walk around with guns. And I can tell you one thing, nobody in their right mind is going to be able to walk around in Washington, D.C. with a gun. They will catch you. They will catch you doing it. You're not, Antifa is not going to bring guns. Any armed Antifa group is totally a government staged operation. I don't give any of these guys any credence. And again, I don't give any of these internet characters any credence either. And unfortunately, that's pretty much all the guests on Activist News as well, besides myself.
Hey, well, there's no problem with that. I mean, saying that, there's no problem. I mean,
so here's the thing. Some folks have standing. And when I talk about something, I have standing, not just because I've read about it on the internet, not just because I heard it secondhand from some source within the government. It's because I personally, those associated and who work with me, have experienced this stuff firsthand, and we're there. So I mean that's really what I'd like to say about this. This whole thing is just a fraud on top of a fraud on top of a fraud. If folks can't through this, there's no hope for them. They're too work with us.
Well, it goes a little further than that. That that even the alt media, from Talpiot Talk to Jeremy Work to every single person on the internet, every single person on DARPAnet. The problem is we need clarification, and there is none. Brendan Gilmore. When have you heard the name Brendan Gilmore? We've never heard the name Brendan Gilmore, who was the State Department asset at the United Right. We never heard of that from anybody because people want to focus on sensationalism, and which is people like Dugan. We can sit back and point at Dugan all we want, right? But at the end of the day, the media uses Dugan as a scapegoat, and what we are seeing again is Zionism and communism at the same source, which is the same source being you have Dugan, but then you have a State Department Israeli asset, Brendan Gilmore from the Obama administration, on the ground. And we have Jared Kushner, who is literally owned by George Soros. That's a Chabad messianic link between a liberal. But you see, you won't hear anybody mention that. Not even the alt-right, nobody. Because it's all about not talking about certain information. And it all goes back to clarification. You guys were the first ones to bring me on Robert Maxwell, and he is literally, when you talk about Trump, if you don't say the name Robert Maxwell, you should not talk about Trump. You don't deserve to be on the internet if you can't say the word Robert Maxwell. I've been trying to get No Race. I've been trying to get every single person on the internet to say the word Robert Maxwell. And this is the response I get. They play it down and they say this. Oh, an Israeli spy? Why does that matter? Why don't you tell me why that matters? Why should I have to tell other people why that matters? I shouldn't have to do that. It's an open source. It's open source on the internet. It's everywhere. I shouldn't have to spend my time every single minute trying to educate people on information that's been around for decades. And you are the only people that can actually say it? That is honestly pathetic. Because you guys have better things to do than educate people on the internet about something that happened decades ago when they can't do it. They can't talk about Brendan Gilmore, George Soros being connected to Kushner, and then obviously being connected to 9/11, and then they can't talk about how Robert Maxwell and why Robert Maxwell is connected to 9/11 and Clinton and Trump. Why can't they say that? See? Talpiot Talk, all of it is sensationalism. Brennan, it's all sensationalism. That's what it's all about. It's the core. The core is sensationalism. Focusing and misdirecting things on other keywords. I can tell you for a fact, Robert Maxwell is what everybody is afraid of. Is Robert Maxwell, because what it does is it connects Israel, China, Russia, America, UK. It connects every one of these countries to one another, and it all is connects to depopulation. What's going on right now in Afghanistan is depopulation. You have Russians training Taliban in Afghanistan, and then you have the US and Israel bombing these poor people that are given AKs. Okay, it's all about depopulation, and the US and Russia and Israel are all helping each other with promised software, and that's how they get these funds around, these black funds. They're getting around like this, and it's driving me insane watching poor people in Afghanistan getting bombed to hell because some Russian agent, some Israeli agent gave them an AK-47, you know? And the thing is, it's not about just Russia or the United States. It's always about problem, reaction, solution. That's the only thing it's ever been about. It's thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. That's the only thing it's ever been about. So when you focus on only one part of those things, you become controlled opposition. It doesn't matter who you are. And I'm sick of having to say this kind of stuff, guys. I'm sick of it. I mean, you guys have probably seen me on Twitter. I'm on Twitter all day saying, hey, Brendan, talk about Robert Maxwell. Hey, Talpiot, talk about Robert Maxwell. But for some reason, that's less important than, okay, China's working with Israel. Well, obviously they're working with Israel, but how are they doing it? Through promise, through these things that have been around for decades, but everybody ignores it, right? Why? Because it exposes it all. In one word, it exposes it all. Okay, and that's all really I gotta say. Brendan Gilmore, State Department Israeli asset on the ground. Okay, and no one wants to talk about it. Not one person. You know, it's crazy.
Well,
these people are all connected, you know, and that's another thing. I've spoken about this in previous videos. If you're new to activist news, you're going to have to go back and check out the videos for yourself. I've got videos of how Richard Spencer himself is directly connected to Dugan and all of these
and CIA.
All of them. They're all part of the same cabal. But just really quickly, I think I've got the the hottest headed people on the show today with me today, and it's a joy. I like both of your work. I watch all of this stuff on YouTube.
Whoa! Don't include me in that. I mean, I go out in really harried situations, and I remain very cool under fire. So,
I know.
No doubt about that.
I'm not taking anything away from you there, but I do want to ask you about some of the relationships in the past. But before we get on to that, I'm just going to quickly read something, and then we can dump the topic if you guys want. Because oops, I keep opening the wrong shit. I'm going to share screens really quickly. I'm going to read this tiny little article. And then we're going to jump into some questions. So if people have questions, just tag me or super chat or whatever you want to do. I'll try to get through them all. I don't miss any on purpose. I know people get upset when I miss their question, but I'm trying to do 100 things at once. So you're just going to have to bear with me and hope for the best. Now, I've got this article here from the Forward, and this is all stuff that we already know, but I just wanted to point it out. And I want to get Charles's response to this. This is an article by the Forward, and it's talking about Jason Kessler's Jewishness. It doesn't go into extraordinary detail, but it's a mainstream media article, so I thought I'd read it. It says here, there are a lot of Jewish and non-Jewish Kesslers out there. It's one of those tricky last names. In the days before the year anniversary of the violent Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, one name in particular keeps getting tossed around. Jason Kessler. The last name Kessler has German and Ashkenazi Jewish origins. Fun fact, it means coppersmith, but Kessler, who planned last year's quote-unquote white supremacist rally, does not appear to be Jewish. In an interview with the Christian Science Monitor, he explained how he jumped from voting for Barack Obama to aligning with the alt-right, casting a ballot for President Trump. Just before I read on, I just want to point out that these people take up many faces and positions. You know, 1 minute they're pro-left, the next minute they're pro-right. They fall into line exactly where their handlers tell them to go. Quote, they weren't afraid to stand up for men of white people or Christians, Kessler said of the alt-right. But this year, he adds, it's been moving forward into an arena of unhealthy obsession with the Jews. Everything is about Jews, 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 unquote. Now, Kessler openly shares that he's quote unquote pro-white and wants to stand up for his people against ethnic cleansing by liberal social policies. Because, you know, it's only the liberals that are the bad guys. You know, guys, it's only the left wing.
Yeah.
This is coming from a guy who used to be left wing as well. I'll just read this last. Okay, I won't. It just goes on about other famous people with the Kessler last name that were Jewish. But I mean, how do you respond to this fellow who I mean, even the
Oh,
article says
well,
is a very tricky person.
well, it's all very self-explanatory and obvious, but at the same time, it's not. And that's the whole conundrum we're in. Is that to some people we see it, but then to others they don't. That the government will use the Jewish community as much as possible because the government is ran by Jews, and that provocateurs who are always Jewish and often Jewish, they always are used by the government, who is also ran by Zionists, Jews, and that Zionism is inseparable from communism, and this is what we're seeing: is that Jason Kessler, being an Obama administration a Jew, a leftist liberal, Jew from the Masonic liberal Jew, is connected to. I mean, he's at the Unite the Right, and there's Brendan Gilmore, who was a Israeli State Department asset from the Obama administration, on the ground, and then you have someone like George Soros, who's bankrolling Antifa, who's connected to Jared Kushner, who is Messianic Judaism. So all together, we have the Zionism and communism all coming together at this event, and that's what we're seeing. Is we have Dugan, Soros, Kushner, and Brennan Gilmore, all these different dots coming together at this event, and what we're seeing, of course, is Zionism and communism, the source of everything. And the problem is that everybody focuses on one part. They focus on the problem, they focus on the reaction, or they focus on the solution. They focus on Brandon Gilmore, or they focus on Dugan, or they focus on the CIA, or Spencer. You have to mention all of it, because when you do, people understand the entire agenda. Again, if you only focus on one part of the agenda, that's not the agenda. That's a part of the agenda. See? And that part of the agenda can be a total opposite to the end of the agenda. That's why you have to focus on every. This is why I say enabling factors, things that enable things to happen. Like, okay, Promise enabled 9/11 to happen. Robert Maxwell enabled Promise to happen. It's a step-by-step process, and if you don't do it, you are exposing yourself as signing a non-disclosure agreement. Non-disclosure agreement, not being able to talk about certain things. You are the only two people I can find that talk about Robert Maxwell. Why is that? Can you guys answer that question? Why Talpiot Talk and Brendan O'Connell will not talk about Robert Maxwell, but you guys who are supposed, Chirs Dorsey is meant to be seen as a crazy person when he's not. Okay, and Mr. No Race will not talk about Robert Maxwell. Well, why is that, Mr. No Race? Is it because you signed a non-disclosure agreement? It's pretty obvious that you did, because you won't manage. This is what they say to me. Their response is the most eye-opening. They'll say, "Why don't you talk about it?" It's not about me talking about it. I already have. It's about you recognizing the fact and then you talking about it. See, they can't take their own time to talk about something like Robert Maxwell. That's how you know that people are really not trying to find the truth. It's about they won't talk about certain things like Brennan Gilmore, Dugan. They're all connected. Jared Kushner's connected to Soros. They're all connected. Jared Kushner's connected to 9/11. It's all connected.
Hey, so yeah. I mean, okay. I hear a lot of names being put out there. So yes, I'm aware of Robert Maxwell. I remember Robert Maxwell from my childhood and adolescence. He was a very famous individual. And
Israeli spy that connects Hillary Clinton. It connects Hillary Clinton and to Trump, and then Trump and Hillary Clinton to Israel, and then Israel to 9/11.
Right. Okay. So you're talking about. I mean, I don't know if I don't know who No Race is, as far as what his deal is. I don't take him seriously, but I do kind of take offense at somebody saying, even though you said I'm not, who
Well,
saying
this thing, people will try to portray you as somebody that you're not. They'll try to say, well, look at Chirs Dorsey. He's being too volatile when you're not. It's obvious that you're not, but this is the thing. You're the only person that will mention the thing that these people won't talk about. That's the whole bane here, is that, okay, they can say whatever they want about you. They can say whatever they want about Daniel, but at the end of the day, they won't talk about something you talked about.
It's because they've fallen into the trap of philo-Semitism. That's what it is. They believe that, hashtag.
They
not
focus
all
on
Jews.
personalities. They focus on Chirs Dorsey. They don't focus on the information. They don't say, look at this information that he's put out that none of we won't talk about, but he's put out information that we won't even touch. We won't talk about COG or Robert Maxwell, but they'll focus on his personality. That's what it's all about. See, and that's what I'm getting at. If the people don't focus on the facts here.
Yeah. Okay. I do want to touch on some of this because this personality conflict is kind of absurd because
especially with Brendan O'Connell and how he's attacking people without any reasoning, rationality, reasoning.
Well, hang on. Let's. I want to hear what Chris has got to say on this.
I like to keep this brief because I don't wish to get into this, but I do have to address this. So these guys are operating virtually anonymous on the internet. That's why I cannot stand DARPANET. That's why I do not like the way we are forced to operate. I like to operate face-to-face, in person, with individuals. And basically, when folks make attacks, I even talked about this with another individual who seems to be Jewish, and at the very least is a government agent, Adam Green. And he says, oh yeah, we got to get to one thing. You seem to be pretty infamous. A lot of people dislike you, and they say a lot of things about what you're doing and what kind of individual you are. And I say, well, that's fine. Number one, they don't know me. And number two, when they attack me, in order to attack me, they have to misrepresent everything about what I do and what I say. So that's why I may have been slightly rude in interrupting Charles, but again, just repeating things that have no basis in reality is something that perpetuates.
Yeah, you're right, and I shouldn't have said that. I'm sorry I said that. I'll be honest. It's just that it's hard to it's just I don't understand that. I just don't. It's such a strange coincidence that you're the only person that you're intimately by everybody who won't talk about Robert Maxwell. It's an obvious coincidence that I can only notice.
Actually, I probably talk more about his daughter than I.
Yeah, his daughter, Ghislaine Maxwell. But that's what I mean. It's a subsequent thing. When you mention the name, you can't help but notice his daughter. That's why I say his name is so important. And then you say, well, look at his daughter, and then look at Epstein, and then it's a blackmail cell to 9/11. It's all obvious. Why should we have to repeat this? We should not have to repeat this. But for some reason, Adam Green, Brendan O'Connell, they can't get to the point, right? They focus on personality.
Because I advise individuals, and I comprehend at this point that this is unsolicited advice. However, this is part of how this whole trap works. These guys, they have absolutely no substance, and I'm talking about all the individuals that Charles has just mentioned. They have absolutely no substance, and they use tactics of agitation, personal attacks, outrageous statements, and snark combined with arrogance in order to build themselves up. They don't do any actual research, and they're proven wrong and contradict themselves constantly. They don't have a background story. This is what I ask everyone when they get involved in this. I'm like, hey, this is kind of a strange thing. You're in a very small minority when one becomes well versed in the subjects that are the most important subjects that we talk about. And so when I discuss this with some of the folks that you mentioned, they like to utilize my work. They like to take my research and pass it off as their own. They like to pretend like they are a part of the same movement / organization. I'm not part of any movement. Any sort of organization is mine and is, you know, clear to see. But when I started asking too many questions about, hey man, like this is unusual. You know, how'd you get involved in politics? How do you know this stuff? And they can't explain themselves. How'd you end up in Malaysia? How'd you end up in Iran? How'd you end up in, you know, wherever? How are you flying all around the world and seemingly aren't doing anything but doing in a much less visible way the exact same thing that I'm doing? You don't get rich off doing this. You can't really travel freely. But I do want to get back to real quick after addressing that and saying, hey, the ad hominem attacks, that's fine. Anyone who knows what they're talking about, which is the only ones that I'm interested in communicating to, they know that their key is to use their assets to get as many followers as they can and misrepresent the facts and lie about anyone who is exposing them. And Brendan Gilmore, I mean, I do want to talk about Brendan Gilmore. He is a very minor character. He was an eyewitness. He is a State Department official, and he's associated with the Democratic Party here in Virginia. He's obviously, you know, Obama chill. But he was, there was this guy named Tom Perriello who I saw on CNN tonight. And he was a congressman from Charlottesville. And Brennan Gilmore is connected to him. And as far as George Soros, we kind of shut the book on George Soros opposing Republicans and conservatives and not being anything besides being a Rothschild shill. When we talked about the fact that George Soros bailed out Donald Trump while he was having financial difficulty, and he was the only reason that his monetary gift to Donald Trump or whoever is behind the Trump Tower in Chicago, Soros, when Trump was going under with that, he financed the rest of it. It would have never gotten done without him. And so there's that connection. George Soros giving money to Donald Trump to complete the Jewish building project. That's where organized crime really likes to launder their money, in construction projects. We talked about prostitution and gambling earlier, which is another two other aspects of this Jewish mafia, but also that it was George Soros owned Smartmatic voting machines that were used in the states Pennsylvania and Michigan that decided the presidential election, and had such a unusual result after polling showed that it wasn't supposed to turn out like that. And I'm talking about pre-polling and exit polling. Not that I put too much stock in that, but George Soros has given tens of millions of dollars directly to Donald Trump when he needed it the most. It was, of course,
Sheldon Adelson as well. Wilbur Ross.
Wilbur Ross. Okay, let's get into Wilbur Ross. Wilbur Ross bailed out, was president of Rothschild Incorporated when Donald Trump owed $4 billion for the mega losses, and they just stuck that on him. The Jewish mob, the Chabad Lubavitch Jewish mob, just stuck that on him. but it was Wilbur Ross who wrote off $4 billion. So when Alan Pomerantz, the lawyer for the interested parties who are all Jewish mobsters in New York and New Jersey and other places where, you know, Florida, it was Alan Pomerantz who said, hey, yeah, so Donald Trump, he owed us $4 billion. He could have never paid that back. But we decided he was worth more to us alive than dead. So what happened? Wilbur Ross, acting on behalf of Rothschild Incorporated, writes off $4 billion in debt and then gives more money to this front man for the Jewish mob, Donald Trump, this character. Is that his real name? To answer the question, no, that is not his real name. Obviously, we know his name is Trump, but in any event, I don't want to get sidetracked on that. I just want to put some clear things out there. If folks can't see through these tactics these guys are using, check out these videos that folks have made, because I know that a lot of folks, and I don't like to keep saying their names, have attacked me after I have destroyed them, just decimated them in a debate, and they come out, they won't show what actually happened. They'll remove videos of 6 hours worth of back and forth and more between us, and they just misrepresent. But folks go back and make videos and catch these guys in lies. So if one is going to be swayed by like the crowd mentality of, hey, this guy is whatever, this guy, nobody listens to him, this guy's, you know, only got 600 YouTube subscribers. Yeah, after I've had 4 channels removed in 1 year. Yeah, after I'm shadow banned. Yeah, but that doesn't count the hundreds of millions of people who have watched me talk about geopolitics, economics, and every other important subject on international television for the past 7 years. And then before that, being an organizer on the ground, knowing what the permitting process is and all of these places where you see them played out. I've known about this before I was even on YouTube, what the permitting process in DC, how to ignore them even if you're supposed to get a permit, how to ignore the government, how to go up to government officials and tell them that they ought to be executed and do it with a gun and get away with it because I'm 100% correct in what I'm saying, and I'm not correct. I'm just saying I believe in the Constitution, and the Constitution requires this punishment for treason. This is all overall about the government run by Jews, run by Vatican Jesuit interests, being engaged in war against the people. Warfare has been going on within humanity since the dawn of humans. I mean, a lot of folks talk about the first scene of the movie, Kubrick movie, 2001. You see, all political will comes at the barrel of a gun. So everything is based on war. Everything that we're talking about, Google, for example. What is Google? Google is a front for Russian Jews and former or children of KGB and GRU agents, Russian military intelligence.
Just on that point.
Just talking about Sergey Brin and Larry Page. They came to the United States. Their parents worked for NASA. There's always been a connection between the cosmonaut program, which is part of the Russian military, and NASA, which runs Google, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We're communicating using the enemy's transmission. And this is a military operation until everybody realizes there's no hope for anyone. And the only worthwhile activity is restoring the Constitution after abolishing the government. And before that, what do we have to do? Gain control of the weapons of war and issuance of currency. Nothing else matters. Everything else is superfluous and is inconsequential. And that's all I'm talking about. I like to get into the details of these things and why they're important. But if anything is to be left out, it's everything else except for the government must be abolished and the people must gain control of all the weapons of war and the issuance of currency. How it's done? We tell you how it can be done, but don't tell me. I'm not telling anyone who's listening or anybody on this recording, but don't tell me, hey, this is impossible. If it's impossible, don't get out of bed in the morning because life is worthless. But I'm saying everything is possible under God, and the only mission of any legitimate group of people is to gain control of the weapons of war and the issuance of currency, or you're a slave. That's it.
That's fair enough. Now we are running a bit short on time, so I'm going to get through some questions. If you do have a question that's not stupid, a reasonable question for either me or the guests, now is the time to tag below. But I'm just going to try and get through these. There's some questions for both of you guys here as well. So if you could give me as short as possible answers. I know that's tough sometimes. But the first one comes from the Mug, who asks me, what are my thoughts on the anti-Semitism controversy enveloping Corbyn and the UK Labour Party? Well, I think it's the same thing I said it was, last year. I had a video on this about how in British Parliament they're trying to put in legislation that would prevent parliamentarians talking about Israel, because talking about Israel in a negative light is the same thing as anti-Semitism. It's all a load of shit. Is Jeremy Corbyn an anti-Semite? No. He's a pedophile though, but that's a different story. He can't be trusted, but no, of course he's not an anti-Semite. We've got one from the Happy Merchant. I'll shoot this one to you if you like, Charles, if you can give me a short answer. I know it's hard sometimes with these questions, but we are a bit short on time. But Happy Merchant says, can you talk about Brexit and how it is straight out of the Dugan playbook?
Yeah. Brexit is another just problem reaction solution. Brexit was never going to become anything. That's what the first thing we have to understand about these operations is that they are never designed to actually be conclusive in what they seem. So people believe that they are supposed to help the quote unquote European British people. It was never designed to actually be conclusive in that manner. It was always designed to finish as on the bottom. You're always designed to lose in these situations. That means that the communists in London, the Zionist communists in London, created that reaction in order for the solution, which is to consolidate more power from Europeans and to further depopulate them from their own continent. That's what it's all about. When we focus on one part of the process, problem, reaction, solution, when we focus on one part of it, we're playing into their game, into their strategy. It's always about exposing the what actually happens in the end with these operations. You never win. You always lose. It's always about the solution.
And they're always, just to add on that, we're going to try and get through these quickly, but one thing I noticed about Brexit is, they promised to leave the EU and all of this sort of stuff. They got in power, they got the vote, won the election, were put into place, and what happened? They started saying things like, "Oh, well, we're going to have this plan and that plan, and we're gonna roll it out by 2030." And they've slowed down so much that there may as well have never even been a Brexit vote. I mean, I would look to people like Salvini as a better example of someone that represents his own country. Whether he's legit or not, I don't know. It remains to be seen, but based on all of the articles I've been reading about Salvini, he's doing great things for Italy so far, I think. And I don't ever advocate for a politician because I know it's all full of shit. But, if you had to choose your own death, what poison you like best, I think Salvini is doing good things, and Brexit could really learn a lot from them. I've got a question from Nathan Kettle for you, Chris. He said it would be great to hear what Chris knows about 1933 and the Corporation of America, and how it ties into the power of the signature. Is that something you're familiar with? I can't say I'm familiar with that one.
Well, like the Corporation of the United States, is that what he's talking about?
I think so. Maybe he's talking about like the. Uh, correct me if I'm wrong, Nathan, if you're still here, but is that like with the whole birth certificate thing about how you're signing yourself as a corporation or something? I'm not really sure what that question means. Do you know what he's talking about at all? He's
I mean, I know that the United States is an incorporation. Federal Reserve Bank is a federally chartered corporation, and that I mean, everything is a corporation. Everything is incorporated. I believe mostly in different locations inside the United States. So yeah, the United States government is just a corporate fiction. I mean, as far as a signature goes, I mean that doesn't mean anything. Sign a signature. What does that mean? It's nothing is binding. Again, without consent. So I mean, folks sign things all the time, and I think the signature has basically been excuse me, replaced by just clicking on a button saying you've read all the fine print in whatever sort of computer program that's put forward. As far as I've been talking and doing interviews about Brexit for many years, and as we said at the beginning, and as I said back then, when Brexit was voted for and was supposed to be put in place, and there was a staged event. Somebody allegedly ran over folks with cars in London, right outside where they were going to vote for Brexit, and there were some questions about that, but it's never, as you said, as you were both saying, it was never meant to come to fruition, and it wouldn't matter if it did, because the Bank for International Settlements is the lender of last resort, and it is the central bank for all the central banks in the world, for every single government. So the European Union, who's the lender of last resort for the European Union? It's the Bank for International Settlements. Who's the lender of last resort for the UK? It's the Bank for International Settlements. And it's just that simple. It's unnecessary to look into anything else. Every government has a secretary source. Every employee of every corporation in the United States corporation or every other government corporation, that money comes from the crypto bank known as the Bank for International Settlements in Basel, Switzerland.
all right. Now, Shawnee Watt asks me, Activist News, can you please explain the GDL from your perspective, if you would be so kind? The GDL, well, we do have the GDL in the house, and what I will say is it's a blood in, blood out scenario, mate. You know, you don't expect KFC to tell you what the secret 11 herbs and spices are. You don't expect 33-degree Freemasons to tell you what what happens in the inner core. You don't expect the OTO to tell you what happens in their little. I won't get into that, because I'll end up censored and in jail, because it's a crime here in Australia to talk about the OTO pretty much. But if you're not inside the GDL, I'm afraid it's just think of it as a mirage. Okay, you can't expect all the people to. What was that?
Talking about the JDL, like the Jewish Defense League?
No, the GDL, the Goyim Defense League.
Oh.
What happens internally is not discussed on the outside. Now, honestly, look, it's a big nothing burger. It's just a a common banner for all of us to align under. It's something that we all. It's like an inside joke. That's what it is. It's an inside joke. But we do have another question here for you, Chris. Blitz777 says, does Chris believe America's Constitution will last with 20 different races in America?
Well, I'm saying to restore the Constitution. And when I say restore the Constitution, I mean restore English common law. So I don't know about, aren't there many more than 20 different nationalities in the United States? I would presume every nationality is in the United States. I, have respect for all other nationalities. I don't really have much respect for Jews, but our plan will never come to fruition, and the humanity shall not be saved if Europeans are not a majority in the United States of America. This is a European country. It doesn't mean we wish to be exclusive, but we always must be the majority of individuals, because everything about the United States of America is based on European culture, European law, and that this nation was created for not exclusively European, but to be a European country, and one can't have a European country without European peoples. And a key point, to repeat myself again, is the Constitution doesn't apply anymore. We are operating under the continuity of operations plan of the Department of Homeland Security and FEMA. So, yeah, I think that the only way to restore sanity is to restore the Constitution. And I'll say this: simple Constitution for the United States would result in the immediate abolition of the government and the execution of all government officials, all corporate officials, and all lawyers. So I'm not advocating that. And I think that we in enforcing and restoring the Constitution shall have to be more merciful than that. I'm just saying that's what the Constitution requires. And anyone who has ever read the Constitution, and you can read it, I always keep a copy here with me within arm's reach of wherever I am. And anyone who reads the Constitution, and you can read it in one sitting. If you haven't read the Constitution already, stop worrying about every other distraction that's thrown at you on the internet, and take, I don't know, maybe an hour and a half at the most, and cover to cover, and then do it again, and then do it again. And you'll realize that is a rational document that is certainly imperfect, but it is much, much better. And I'm not talking about the 13th and 14th Amendment, which are unconstitutional. I'm talking about restoring the Bill of Rights. I'm talking about specifically restoring English common law based on the writings of John Locke. And this all is very obvious and self-explanatory once one does that. So that's what I have to say about that. All
right. Well, we're getting really short on time. But I do have another question for you, Chris. This person asked me the question. They tagged this like 1,000 times, so they demand that I ask you this. Seek for Veracity says, ask Chris if it's true that the US was founded by Freemasons. Can you give a quick response to that?
Yeah, I mean, I'll talk about that, but I believe I've already stated in this conversation. I don't know whether he just came on the program or not, but that yes, I believe I've mentioned this twice already in this broadcast, that many of the so-called founding fathers were certainly Freemasons. But I mean, the first secret society that Thomas Jefferson was in was something called the Flat Hat Club. So that was,
is that like a kipper?
And
is that like a bunch of kipper wearers that follow the flat Earth or something? Or
would more be associated with like a top hat. But that was founded at the College of William and Mary when Jefferson was a student there. And certainly Jefferson was no fan of Jews and organized Jewry. And so to just say that these guys are Freemasons, many of them were members of an organization called the Odd Fellows, and not just, you know, the signers of the Declaration and
so they were more than that. Basically, they were, but they were a lot more than that too.
Well, I explain this. Freemasonry is a faction of secret societies based in Egyptian mystery schools, which I'm a student of. And I'm not fearful to say, again, I don't have any respect for modern day Freemasons. And I tell them over and over again, and they keep coming back and listening and liking my programs and sharing them and even doing work for our internet channels. But I tell them, I'm the most worshipful Grand Master of all the Freemasons. And I am above the Pope of Rome. And why is that? Not because I'm some sort of great individual. I'm saying everybody can say that, because these organizations are just made up for individuals to manipulate other individuals. They don't mean anything. Think for yourself. And that's all I have to say. Freemasons are not something to respect, but they're also not something to fear as some sort of boogeyman. Look at who controls and owns the land. It has to do with blood.
We are getting a bit short on time, but I do have one more question for you really quick, because a couple of people asked this. They want me to ask you if you blew off Truth Seeker at the APAC event, and if you did, why or what happened. Can you explain that in less than a minute? Truth Seeker 2, the YouTuber.
Yeah, I didn't blow him off. I mean, we went there and I didn't see him there. So I don't know who this guy is. I don't know what, you know, we have to be careful about what we're doing. And as we said, everybody we deal with the exception of everybody that we know personally, that we meet face to face, that we shake hands with face to face, that follow exactly the clear agenda that we put forward, if anybody starts deviating from that, I believe with that guy, and thanks for reminding me, I was like, who's Truth Seeker? That was some guy whose last name was Garcia. He said he was from Connecticut, and he was advocating really bizarre and dangerous things to do during these events. And as was mentioned before, I've been doing this for years and years and years, and somebody who starts saying like, hey, you need to show up to this place where you're going to be targeted by the police, you're going to be targeted by any and all security, and we need to wear all the same matching t-shirts. That's when it doesn't take much for me to just completely say, look, I don't need to explain why I blow off somebody. I have my reasons and I explain them, but I don't need to explain them. This other person doesn't have any sort of legitimacy. He doesn't have any sort of standing. You know, somebody making a YouTube page doesn't, and having it up for a year or so and not being able to explain anything about why they're doing something or what their motivation is, it doesn't matter to me. I don't have to explain to any anonymous individual out there why I'm doing what I'm doing. What we need is we need an organization. We don't need an organization where our group of small individuals who are doing the right thing has to unite with a larger group of individuals that are doing the wrong thing. Everyone must coalesce around exactly what we're doing and what we're saying, and we go over this over and over and over again about why this is. And the only reason that is because this is the basis of the law. There's only one right answer, and that's the militia. Anyone else who deviates from that, anyone who even questions me, that's it. It doesn't matter, what these guys do or what they say. We decide. I don't need to explain why I'd blow somebody off. I showed up, and there's no evidence that he showed up. Did this guy even show up? I don't know. I didn't see him.
Yeah, I don't understand the full backstory too, but two people did ask me that, as far as I saw. So I did want to do my due diligence and ask them that. So I just
person that asked you that.
Sorry, what was that?
How do you know it's not the same person that asked you twice?
Oh, it could very well be. I don't know. Two different names came up.
Can I say one last thing to Chris before we all wrap this up?
All right. Well, it's got to be super quick.
Chris, I want to apologize for my conduct in the last part of the interview. I will be disclosing my last name soon. It's just that I am very new to this. You guys are the ones who inspired this thought process, and so I just wanted to, sorry for cussing. That was very unprofessional and very childish. So maybe we can have another interview in a few months. We'll see. So thank you.
Well, I'm happy to do a part. I'm happy to do a part 2 another time. We are just getting really super close to that 2-hour mark. I hope we answered as many questions as we could. I tried to get us through as much as I could in a short space of time. But yeah, I want to thank you both for coming on the show. I'm just going to share screens really quickly and show you where you can catch my guests if you want to find more of their information. This, of course, is one of Chirs Dorsey's YouTube channels, Militia Intelligence Report number 2. The link's up there. This is the page here. He's also on Twitter. I recommend people go follow him so they can keep up to date whenever he does his shows and his podcasts. A lot of my friends follow him, I can see. So we travel around some similar circles and online at least anyway, and we cover some similar topics. So I recommend people go check that out. The Militia Handbook is here available on the website. I've put the link in the comments a few times. And Charles, of course, is on Twitter. I've been agitating him, trying to get him to make a YouTube channel. Whether he does or not, I guess we'll find out soon. But this is where you can follow his work. He's got some great stuff here that goes right into the very murky depths of the Promise software and the collusion between Russia and Israel, and also the United States, the CIA, and all of that sort of stuff. So yeah, on that note, folks, I want to thank everybody for watching. This is Activist News. Thank you, and be sure to like the video, give it a thumbs up, comment below your thoughts if you're not watching this as a stream. If you have any questions, maybe I'll do a part 2, because I think we could talk all day. So yeah, if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe. Check out Chris's channel as well. And on that note, thanks for watching, folks. Take care. Peace.